Good morning, folks. It is a beautiful day. And this morning, I just realized something new that new for me and exciting. I'd like to share with you. This is a teaching from today's Parsha. It is Parshat Emor, and we are in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, and chapter 23 in the book of Leviticus starts by talking about the whole system of holidays, the sacred times. I think it was Abraham Joshua Eshel, the late sage, 20th century great sage, who wrote in his book that that Shabbat is a sanctuary, a temple in time. So imagine that reality, as we know, is comprised of space and time, and whereas a sanctuary, a temple is a sanctuary in space. So then Shabbat, or sacred times, are a sanctuary in time. What a beautiful way of understanding Shabbat as a practice, a retreat, a time for sacred retreat, and disconnection from the flow of ordinary life in order to allow time for reflection, for ascension, for spiritual catharsis, spiritual time, family time, self-nurturing time. So that is Shabbat at its basic. So here the Torah is introducing for the first time the holidays in this manner, and Shabbat as the practice of sacred time. For us, for the Jewish, the Israelites, we're not Jewish yet, these are the Israelites in the desert. So here we go. Let me, I've read this paragraph over and over again over the years, and I never really understood it until I have just recently reading the Slonimer. And I'd like to discuss this really delicious teaching in Netivot Shalom by the Slonimer. So here is the verse. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor. And God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the people of Israel. V'amarta alehem, and say to them, Moadei Adonai asher tikru otam, the times, and Moadim means sacred times, so Moadei Adonai, the sacred times that you will call, Mikraei Kodesh Ele, are called times. These called times are my times, times dedicated to me. And God continues, Sheshet Yamim ta'aseh melacha. On 6 days you will do your labor. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton, Mikra Kodesh. And on the 7th day, it is a Sabbath of Sabbaths. Again, a Sabbath of Sabbath, and Shabbat literally means to cease or to retreat. So you could also translate is on the 7th day you'll have the retreat of retreats, Mikra Kodesh, a called in sacred time. Now this verse that we just read is full of contradiction and ambiguity. Seems simple at first read, but really it's not so simple. I always thought that Mikraei Kodesh, which is the called sacred time, means the time on which we read from sacred texts. And in fact, our custom is that every holiday and every Shabbat in the synagogue, we read from the Torah. And I always thought that that referred to that. But here the Slonimer talks about it in a whole different way and hits, obviously, as we know, whenever we hit ambiguity, we know that there's a deeper teaching, there's a hidden nugget to be extracted. Excuse me. So let's jump right in. And here's the Slonimer. דאיירי בעניין שבת כתיב שבת שבתון מקרא קודש. With regard to Shabbat, it says a retreat of retreats, a Sabbath of Sabbaths, the called sacred time. ואילו כל המועדים נקראים רק שבתון. But all the holidays are not called a Sabbath of Sabbaths. They're called a minor Sabbath. So in other words, the retreat of retreats or the Sabbath of Sabbaths can also be translated as the Sabbath and the minor Sabbath. Shabbaton means minor. When you add a ton or at the end of a word, it makes it the, what is the word? The diminutive or the, anyway, so the micro version, right? So Shabbat is the full Shabbat, that means the Sabbath, and the Shabbaton means minor Sabbath or the lesser Sabbath. So all the holidays in the Torah are called minor Sabbaths. And in fact, that is how it works. So on Shabbat, there are more observances, more restrictions, and on the holidays, there are less. For instance, on a holiday, we can cook. On Sabbath, we don't cook. We don't light fire. So there's sort of the holidays or the festivals are, and by festivals we mean Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. They are easier times. Observances are less intense, you could say, compared to the Sabbath. So, and in fact, the Torah relates to festivals as Shabbaton, but here it relates to the seventh day as the Sabbath of Sabbaths, or the Sabbath and the minor Sabbath. And we need to understand, what does that mean? In other words, it's ambiguous. It's not clear. So what is the Torah trying to tell us here? But furthermore, before we jump into the answer, another question. We also need to understand the expression Mikra Kodesh, the called sanctity. Shekatuv kan al Shabbat, which is referring here to the Sabbath, because originally that is what we call the festivals, the holidays, Mikra Kodesh, the called, I call holy day, right? So Mikra comes from the word kara, which means to read. It also means to call. Kol kore bamidbar. There's a calling voice in the desert, right? Please call any time. In other words, the word calling is a called sacred time. Who is calling it? What is this calling? Why does the sacred time need to be called? What is this term called sacred time, Mikra Kodesh? We're going to explain that. But also, why is it referred here to the Sabbath? שהרי בשם מקרא קודש נקראים הימים הטובים. It's the festivals that are called the Mikra Kodesh. And they're different from the Sabbath. How can the Sabbath be called both the Sabbath and the minor Sabbath, or the Sabbath of Sabbaths, and also a called sacred time? The reason the festival is termed or coined a called sacred time is because there's a essential difference between the energy of the Sabbath and the energy of a festival. We need to understand this. It's actually a critical difference that I think it illuminates a principle in spiritual life, in spiritual work. It's really important to understand and to sort of wrap our minds around. And here's the difference. קדושתם נמשכת על ידי שישראל קוראים אותם. The sanctity of the festivals comes about because Israel calls it. In other words, the sanctity of festivals is not inherent. The days of the festivals, those sanctuaries in time for Passover, for Shavuot, for Sukkot, in and of themselves, they're not inherently holy. They're regular days. What makes them holy? That we call it so. It's our intentionality. It is me, by my preparation, by my intentionality, by my observance, by setting up the meals, by my prayers, by my, by donning special clothing, by getting together with community. As a community, we have communal practices that have been defined through consensus over millennia, right? It's sort of evolved through communal process and communal creativity and the channeling of our leaders and our sages of what it means to observe and how to observe, right? So we make these days holy. We also define them. We need to make a calendar. We need to decide which day on the calendar, because the festivals have to do with the lunar combination of the lunar and solar calendars, and the calendar needs to be adjusted every 4 years, and which the way the Jewish calendar works, being a combined lunar solar calendar is a lesson unto itself. We won't get into the details now, but there's a lot of doing. There's a lot of activity, both external, circumstantial, and internal, that we, Jews, the community and individuals, and if you're not Jewish, how do you call time sacred? How do you turn an ordinary day into sanctuary in time? Those are the festivals. Festivals are, you'll hear the term a little later, itaruta deretata. They're instigated. This is Aramaic for, this is an enlightenment process that's instigated from below, meaning in the human realm. So here we have sanctity that's instigated, initiated, and made so through human effort. כדאיתא מהאריז"ל, ולכן שבת נקרא קודש, כדכתיב ושמרתם השבת כי קודש היא לכם. But here is how it's different from Shabbat, as we learned from Rabbi Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist. And he says, Shabbat is already inherently sacred. And we see this in the Torah. It tells us, "V'shamartem et Shabbat ki kodesh hi lachem." You will observe the Sabbath because it is sanctity for you, or sanctified for you. מטעם שהשבת מקדשה וקיימה, ואינה תלויה בקביעות החודש בעבודתם של ישראל. And this is because the Shabbat, the Sabbath, is already in of itself, in the design of the cosmic time scheme. Every seventh day at that time, there's an inherent holiness, there's an energy of sanctity. And it does not depend on the vicissitudes of the lunar and the solar month. B'kvi'ot hachodesh. Neither does it depend on the spiritual practice of mortal humans, on Israel. It doesn't depend on the community of Israel. It doesn't depend on our action. Shabbat is Shabbat. My beautiful friend and colleague, Rabbi Marsha Prager, I just acknowledged her the previous video. She's coming up a lot right now. Thank you, Marsha. Once taught me that if you took time and folded time as an accordion, like kind of flapping like that and kind of put it together. Imagine that time was a page and you kind of folded it like an accordion and you put it together. And you took a needle of eternity and you punctured through time. On every page, you would have this puncture of the needle of eternity. And each of those holes is the Sabbath. So you have a fold with a hole, and the next fold has a hole, the next fold has a hole, next fold has a hole, and the next fold has a hole. And we're moving through time, and every seventh day we hit that hole where eternity punctures time. Imagine that. So the Sabbath is a time outside of ordinary time, cosmically designed. It's kind of like it's in the operating system. Therefore, it doesn't really depend. We're not calling it. It's already called. You see what I'm saying? Therefore, we're really discovering Shabbat. And that's the idea of ceasing, of retreating. I cease, I retreat, right? I step back from ordinary life. And as I do that, I discover that, I'm actually sitting within an eternity bubble. That is the potential of the Sabbath retreat. It's kind of a 7-day cycle. Seven is a sacred number. It's based on ancient observations of the 7 planets that were visible to the naked eye, and and 7 is a number of wholeness, of completeness, right? So in our ordinary existence, nothing is complete. We're always moving towards something, right? We're not complete. Our lives are not complete. Our family is not complete. Our work is not complete, right? We're always striving. There's always something to work towards, right? Our belly is never full, right? So life by design is never complete. We're on a journey towards some kind of completion. But the Sabbath is, because eternity is by design complete. So it doesn't depend on us. We do not have to call it sacred. It is sacred. We just have to discover. We have to annul something, step into the bubble of eternity, annul something. Many spiritual traditions talk about, the Buddhists, more often talk about, mindfulness practice about clearing the mind. So the Sabbath is a clearing so we can discover a different state of mind, a different paradigm, a different existence that is really not available to us and shouldn't be available to us as we are in the striving and the doing and the work of ordinary days. So here we go. The Sabbath is not dependent. It's this eternal cycle of 7. Does not depend on the seasons. Does not depend on the calendar. It's just time ongoing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this goes on forever and ever and ever. And that's the Sabbath. So teaches the Holy Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, this is the case for the Sabbath, but it's not the case for the holidays, because the holidays are created through the effort and the toil and the instigation of human spiritual effort. We call the sacredness. We make these days sacred. And continues the Slonimer, ויש לבאר על פי מה דאמור בספר הקדוש דברי משה מהרב הקדוש Moshe Midolina. We're returning here to Reb Dolina, who was the student of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. We mentioned him in the past video as well, who comments on the teaching of the Ari and Rabbi Isaac Luria. And he says, look, the Sabbath really has two aspects. It has the aspect of inherent holiness. יש בו גם הבחינה השנייה של מקרא קודש, but it also has within it the aspect or a flavor of called sanctity. שאת ההשגות העליונות ומוחין דגדלות של שבת קודש ממשיכים על ידי ההכנה, that the attainment of high state of consciousness on the Sabbath is really there for us through our preparation, our calling, our instigation. And we do that through preparing for the Sabbath, through the prayers and the meditations that are involved with preparing this for the Sabbath and throughout the Sabbath itself. That's why the Sabbath has two different aspects, two different energies. One aspect is the aspect of the Mikadsha V'Kaima, the inherent sanctity. And the other aspect is Mikra Kodesh, the called or the instigated sanctity. And when we instigate, that's how we discover, that's how we connect, and that's how we ascend, we rise to ascending levels of this puncture of eternity. And this is the potential. This is what we can do as we practice the Sabbath, and it depends on the level, the attainment, or the experience of the Sabbath is an experience. The experience is not inherent, or the level of the experience is not inherent. The potential of the experience is inherent on the Sabbath. But the level, the attainment that any individual can attain, the experience that any individual can have on the Sabbath, that depends on our instigation, our preparation, in our spiritual work. And that's why, he says, the Torah calls the Sabbath both the Sabbath, or the Sabbath of Sabbath, and the instigated sacredness, Mikrei Kodesh. ויש לומר עוד כפל הלשון שבת שבתון לרמז על שתי הבחינות. And he says, in fact, the reason it says Sabbath and minor Sabbath, or Sabbath, Sabbath of Sabbath, Sabbath, which is which is really redundant. It's a duplication. It could have just said one word. Could have just said Sabbath. That comes to show that in the Sabbath there are these two aspects: the aspect of the inherent sacredness, and the aspect of the instigated sacredness. Beautiful teaching. Isn't it so that it's intuitive to us that in our spiritual lives there is the sacred, the holiness that we just kind of bump into? It's like that puncture of eternity. We kind of go about life, and it's called, some people call it grace. It just happens to us. There's a moment. There's a coincidence. There's a moment. There's a state of mind that we fall into. It surprises us. It's like a gift, right? We kind of bump into the inherent sanctity that's available in life. We just don't see it, but the veil is removed by either grace or accident, or, call it as you will. And then there's the other side of spirituality, which is a spirituality that we attain through work, through our instigation, right? There is the practice, the regularity of meditation that over time brings me into an ability, into what we call the level of an adept. I have tools, I'm developing tools. Oh, I have these sacred phrases that I can say that will start shifting my state of mind. I have this posture I can sit in. I have this clothing. I have this sanctuary, this shrine in my house, right? Maybe I have a little altar where I have some things. I put my tefillin, I put my, my sacred books, my talit, right? I have my little corner that's just dedicated to that. So I'm building skills. I'm building what some call skillful means. And I develop a competency over time. There's something inside myself that gets built up. And I do that with effort. It's my work. And that's how I claim more sanctity, more spirituality. It's beautiful work. It's worthy work. And it bears fruit over time. So both are there, right? There's the grace, there's the inherent sacredness that surprises us, and there's the sacredness that we attain through our effort. And both of those are included on the amazing seventh day of retreat, the Shabbat. With much gratitude to Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, who has brought that down to us 3,200 years ago, and has instructed us, through the words, the mysterious, mystical words of the Torah. May we be blessed to touch the honey, the nectar of both the inherent and the attained connection to spirit. And may this be a day, this day, which is not a Sabbath. In fact, this is a beautiful Wednesday morning, beautiful spring day, the sun is shining. May we be surprised with inherent sanctity, and may we do the little bit that we can to elevate ourselves and the world around us towards that sanctity today. I'm Rabbi Ruben Modik with Hebrew Learning Circles and Makom Halev community in Nyack, New York. Thank you for sharing this time with me. It's just delicious to share this teaching with you. and spend this time with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below, and let's continue the conversation. I would love a like. If you could just give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Come back on Facebook. Come back for more. Tomorrow, the next day. Thank you for this study. Be well. Many blessings.